We are back with another episode of the Erectile Dysfunction Radio Podcast. Today, we want to explore the patient's perspective on dating and sex, in particular when it comes to facing erection challenges after a cancer diagnosis. We are joined by Michael Kasson, who experienced the diagnosis of prostate cancer shortly after his divorce. We want to hear about his story and what we can learn about the challenges of erections when encountering challenging life circumstances. Thank you, Michael, for joining us.
My pleasure.
So can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your diagnosis?
Do you want age and so forth?
Please.
Okay. Well, I will be 75 in September. At the time that the diagnosis happened, which was about 1996, 1997, you can take off about 25 years. So I was about 50 at the time. I was, as I think I've mentioned, in the throes of a divorce. I won't go into the circumstances, but it was, I would say, an amicable parting. And I was looking forward, since I had, been married. I was, now about 50, and I really was hoping for family. I was hoping that at some point that would come along. And when I got the diagnosis of prostate cancer and the recommendation of a radical prostatectomy, it was kind of like, who's going to want me now? How am I possibly going to get past this and have a family?
Okay, so it was a pretty devastating diagnosis at that stage of your life. But I want to kind of just set the stage a little bit more and understand. So
sure.
After exiting your marriage, what was your outlook and your hopes for your next stage of life? You mentioned wanting to start a family. Can you share with us a little bit more, though, of that mindset? What were you looking for from a relational perspective, from a sexual perspective?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, as I said, since I have been married more than once previously, and neither marriage had yielded a family, that was really foremost, especially since I was about 50, and I was looking not for casual dating or anything like that. I was looking to be involved in a serious relationship with someone who probably had been through similar things themselves in terms of divorce. And, perhaps ironically, I thought that I would probably remarry someone who had also been married and had had children from a previous marriage and might be looking to perhaps have one more child. That's not the way it turned out in my case. I was kind of shocked because my assumption at the time was no one who has never been married would understand my circumstance, let alone accept me. And I turned out to be 180 degrees or wrong.
Okay, but you were looking for, a family, and you had, it sounds like, all but convinced yourself of who a suitable partner would have been, given your life circumstances up until that point.
Right. Yeah.
But you were optimistic that this next stage of life would hopefully yield a partner that would be on board for, establishing a family, and hope to do that as you
very much so
into your 50s. Now, Michael, how did you learn that you had prostate cancer?
I think I had some problems urinating. And so I was referred by my internist first to somebody in New York. And I was not, it wasn't that I didn't accept the diagnosis. It was the way that the information was presented to me that I went like, do I want to put my life and my future and possibly a family into this person's hands? And that information came about as a result of somebody in my family who was an anesthesiologist at a hospital in California. He was one of the first people I talked to. And he said, look, if you're looking at surgery, you are looking to make a very short but intense and life-changing partnership. And you want to be comfortable with whoever that partner is. And if you're not comfortable, you should not do your procedure at that place or with that person. This is not the time to mess with that. You should feel comfortable and you should feel that you want to go forward. So as I said, I had looked first at surgery with somebody at a hospital in New York. And then I had talked to somebody about seed implant, also with someone in New York, and I just was not comfortable with either of those people. But then I heard about someone at Johns Hopkins, and I knew that they had an expertise in that area and in that surgery. So I went with a friend, in fact, down to see this person, and I instantly felt comfortable. It felt, yes, I could place my life and my future in this man's hands. So I said, let's go forward.
Got it. So, Michael, a cancer diagnosis, in particular, when it has the potential to impact sexual function, can really rock a man's confidence. Did you experience this?
Absolutely. The first thing I said to myself was, who's going to want me now? In fact, I said it to my family. I'm a loser. Who's going to want me? Who's going to see a future in me?
Yeah. Sounds like you were really kind of down on yourself, especially, again, kind of coming off that like optimism of really kind of being able to establish a family, find the right, partner and whatnot. And now you get really hit with this diagnosis, and it takes you to this like, dark kind of place of who's going to want me? Like, how am I going to now? How did you overcome this?
I made up my mind that I was going to go through it and not around it, and that somehow I was going to come out on the other side and things would be fine. And so with that in mind, I said, all right, there are going to be a lot of brick walls that I hit before I find the street that's going to take me where I want to go. So I just have to accept that that's the fact, and this is the way I need to go.
Yeah. So it sounds like your biggest concern with this prostate cancer diagnosis was that you would not be able to find a partner afterwards. Nobody would really want you.
And
it sounds like that was weighing on you pretty heavily.
Yes, it was. It was. In fact, in one instance, a very well-meaning friend, had fixed me up with a woman whose husband had recently died of cancer. And she, I think, had a child through that first marriage. And I said to my friend, are you sure this person wants to go out with me? Does she understand my circumstance? And she said, well, yes, she does. I said, well, maybe what we should do is meet for lunch and talk a bit and then see if we want to go out. And so we did. We met and we talked, and she was very pleasant, and I was very open about what was going on. And it led to, would you like to go out on another date? She said, sure. So we did. But on that second date, I got the vibe that there was something else going on in her mind. Like, do I really want to get myself involved, in something like this, with this risk, knowing what I've been through and knowing what he's been through? And I could kind of feel it pulling back. And I went like, I don't think that's going to go away for this person. And I don't think this match is one that's going to work. So she had wanted to go out a second time, but I said, you know what? In view of the circumstances, I think maybe that may not be the right thing to do right now.
Okay. And again, it's hard to know if that was stemming from you, stemming from her, but that was the headspace that you were in, which is, like, I don't know if I'm going to be the right match for anybody. So, Michael, kind of shifting back toward the diagnosis and treatment. So you mentioned that you were looking for the right kind of doctor until you landed on somebody at Hopkins. Now, what were the treatment options that were presented to you?
Well, again, the treatment options at the time were do nothing, which that was not an option for me. One was seed implant, and one was the gold standard, which was a radical prostatectomy. And they said, look, you're a relatively young man. They said, the person that I went to that ultimately became my surgeon said, look, a lot of people who come in here are in their 70s and they're more likely to die with prostate cancer than of prostate cancer, but you're about 50. You've got a good 25 plus years ahead of you. And under the circumstances, I would recommend to you that you probably should do the surgery. And we can, I don't know how far you want to go with this, but we can preserve sperm, freeze it, and so forth, so that if you do want to have a family someday, you can do that. And as I said, he presented it in such a way that I felt like this is the right choice.
Because at the time you really only had three options, which is wait, which nothing really means monitor and see how it progresses.
Right. Right.
Seed implants, which we're not going to get into at the moment. And then the third was the surgery, which I believe ultimately is the route that you went, correct?
Yes.
Now, were the sexual implications of treatment a part of your decision making?
They were, but they weren't the primary. Again, the primary for me was to survive this, to get past it successfully, and to begin the next stage of my life, which I hope would lead to a family, remarriage and a family and so forth.
Did you have any concerns about finding a suitable partner in the event of challenges with sexual function? Was that part of your thought process or part of your consideration?
Very much so. Very much so. I was concerned that even if someone was attracted to me, when we got to the point where, and as I'm sure you know, that erectile function doesn't necessarily return immediately. It took a while. So if that happened, was somebody going to be turned off, put off by that? Was my vulnerability going to become her vulnerability and saying, I'm not willing to go there? That's a bridge too far for this relationship. Yeah. That was a real concern.
Absolutely. Now, Michael, I know this is a bit of a personal question. Obviously, all of this is personal. Prior to the diagnosis of prostate cancer, had you ever experienced any pronounced period of a sexual function challenge, like erectile dysfunction or premature ejaculation? Or was this the first time that you were potentially going to be facing a prolonged period of sexual function challenge?
It was the first time. It was the first time. Up to that point, from what I could tell, the equipment was working pretty well, so to speak. My both in dating and in marriage, my partners had been pleased. There was never a question about that. And yeah, I was admittedly, pretty pleased with myself and wondering what's going to happen now. Who am I going to be on the other side of this, and who will want to be with me?
Yeah, and that's a question I think a lot of men ask themselves when they're faced with having to make these decisions. Will I be the same man? Will I feel like the man afterwards? Now, did the diagnosis or treatment process delay dating? In other words, were you waiting for certain milestones to get back into the dating game? And what was that point, if so, that you felt comfortable to date?
It didn't delay dating, but it made me much more cautious than I would have been. I thought that there might be, for example, an age factor there, thinking that, well, first of all, I'm not sure that somebody my age would want to be married, well, certainly not to somebody in their 20s, because I would think they would be expecting, a life, 50 plus years of a different kind of relationship, sexual and otherwise. 30s, I thought, well, maybe if somebody who was in their 30s was divorced and perhaps had a child already, they would understand. They would be more accepting of an exceptional circumstance like that. And in fact, I did go out with somebody like that. And yet, even with all of that and all the acceptance, it just was not the right fit. And I was, in fact, quite surprised at who was the right fit. What turned out was someone that I had gone out with previously, like, some years before my recent divorce, who had never been married, never had children, but whom I knew pretty well, is the person I started going out with. And I thought, wow, okay, well, let's see where this goes. I thought, well, maybe this is going to be something casual, but then it became something very serious. And as I think I may have mentioned to you in the past, when we did ultimately get to a sexual point in a relationship, and everything worked. And as I had been told, and I've been told this by people who had been through the surgery, they said, the feeling's going to be the same. You will feel pleasure. She will feel pleasure. It's not about does this work or does that work. It's how you please each other and yourselves that's going to happen. And that all happened. And as I think I may have mentioned at some point when you and I spoke previously, When that happened, I burst into tears because I really wasn't sure that was going to be the case.
Okay, so Michael, can you fill us in just a little bit more of a timeline? Because every man is different with this, but I think it would be helpful for our listeners just to know. So how long did it take post the surgery to regain sexual function and to regain sexual confidence? And I recognize that those may be two very different timelines.
Right. I had the surgery, and I would say it took at least 6 months before I had what I would consider to be full or nearly full sexual function, and probably a good year before I felt like, yeah, this is good, this works, this is fine.
Yeah, so it took a whole another 6 months to really get the confidence back up and running, which
yes,
it's that's a common occurrence that a lot of times it is the confidence that comes in last. Once you learn how to kind of retrust your body and trust yourself in those settings, and then I take it that you went on to have a healthy relationship. From what I understand, the two of you are married. Is that correct?
Yes, and have been married for over 22 years now. And as I said, that was a total shock to me because, as I said, this is someone I had known in my life. I had known previously. We had even gone out on a few dates here and there, but not ever at the level that we were at, and with all of the things that we both were facing, certainly that I was facing, but also I felt like she had not been married previously. I felt like, is she going to understand, what I'm feeling, what's going on? And absolutely, she has. She understood, and she still does.
Okay, that is really, really fantastic. So, Michael, if I had to ask you just as a wrap-up question, if you had to give one piece of advice based on your experience for men who are just at that precipice of starting to date again after exiting a relationship, either after a divorce, a breakup, sometimes it's a loss of a spouse, and they are concerned about or are experiencing elements of a sexual dysfunction, what would you say to men who are in that position, hesitant about maybe getting out into the dating game because they are not so confident or not as confident as they used to be?
I would say, don't be afraid to take the risk. Take the risk, because if you take the risk, there's a chance that you will be surprised, as I was, and get into what you're looking for. If you don't take the risk, then you know for sure that will never happen for you. Yeah.
Okay, it's a really powerful message. Michael, thank you once again for joining us. We really appreciate you being just so open, vulnerable to talk about your experience. I'm sure this is going to benefit a lot of the listeners out there.
Thank you. If this helps at least one more person out there, or one more man who's struggling with it, then I will be very, very happy that I've done it, because I vowed when I went through this, if I can make this easier for somebody else, I'm going to do that.
And we hope that message gets to way more than one or two men. Once again, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks.